And so somebody was asking if I was in love with this couple because they tend to pop up a lot. And this happens a lot where like the secondary characters take over. So I think that I am very attached to the characters. Um, and the and they will usually like step on and kind of talk to me, like almost like poke me, like, hey, you invented me, you put me on the page. I was like this side character over here in this book, but really I have my own story. Like I need to tell you my story. Like, come on, I need to tell you my story.
Hi, everyone. It's Samantha T, and welcome to another Fresh Fiction Video Book Club. Tonight, our guest is Asa Maria Bradley, and I was shocked when I was looking up some of her books to get refreshed on things that the first book, which I have on my bookshelf, is The Viking Warrior Rising, which was published back in 2015. 10 years ago. So we've got a lot of stuff to talk about. But Asa has been nominated multiple times for the RWA's Rita Award, the Reviewer's Choice Award nomination, a Holt Medallion win, and also was the Bookseller's Best Award winner. So Asa, it is so good to see you. Big fan of your books.
Thank you. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, I can hear you great.
Okay, perfect.
Awesome. See, these are the technical things we have to get out of the way, right? It's like, okay, does
Yeah,
everybody see
yeah.
this? Does the sound come through all right? Well, Asa, let's start off with something a little bit easy. How did you first get started writing romance?
Um, I started writing, I think I started writing I'd written a book and it was more like a women's fiction, kind of like I'm dating myself, but it was almost like a chick lit fiction. And I went to my first writing conference I live in the east side of Washington State and I was in Seattle. And it was a big writing conference with writers from all different genres and nonfiction and poetry and everything else. And I was feeling very lost and like kind of wandering around. I'm a bit of an introvert too, so it was overwhelming that there were so many people. And I bumped into I took a break because I had been to a bunch of talks, and so I took a break after everybody had lunch and went and sat in the bar just to sort of breathe for a bit. And there was another woman sitting a couple tables over, and obviously she was an extrovert because she immediately went, "Oh, are you here for the conference? Like we should sit at the same table and chat. Tell me about your book." And so I told her about my book, and she's like, "Oh, so you write romance too?" And I was like, "No, I don't think it's romance," because I was sort of thinking about like, my grandmother's Harlequin kind of romance. And she's like, "Yeah, yeah, I think you do. Come with me. We're going to go to this other panel. It's all romance authors." And I walked in, and it was a completely different feeling compared to the talks I had been before. It was like these four women, amazing authors. People were laughing, people were talking about sex, people were talking about characters that they were falling in love with. And I was like, yeah, this is exactly what I'm reading. This is exactly what I'm writing. And these are my people. And so I think I was writing romance early on. And then once I sort of knew that was actually what I was writing, I leaned more into it. And also that was what I was reading. I was reading a lot of paranormal romance, and this is really before fantasy romance had really taken off, but fantasy with strong female characters basically was what I really liked reading.
And I think that's been echoed with so many of our readers and writers that we've had through Fresh Fiction, where it is a case of it seems like we found our tribe, right?
Yeah.
These are books that we enjoy reading. It's not quite the lofty literature always. I mean, we've got strong heroines, great storylines, and awesome world building.
Yeah, and I think that the whole idea of the bodies rippers of, women in peril, those are from people that don't know romance, because we know that the romance novels that are doing well, no matter what subgenre in romance is going on, are the women that are like out there kicking ass and saving themselves, and they just happen to also fall in love, whether they're saving the world or, solving complex problems or um, finding the murderer of some, horrific crime. But they're not helpless women. They're very strong women. So yeah, romance is definitely my jam.
And the other thing that is unique unique with your books because you're originally from Sweden. And when we were talking a few weeks ago in book club, Sarah was actually really wanting some Viking romance. And it's like, okay, good Viking romance writers. And we're all saying, oh no, well that's Asa Maria Bradley. And but with that, we don't see a lot of advanced writers that focus Viking and
Sorry, you
mythology. When you were first getting started to incorporate into your because it wasn't.
no, I think what I was getting was more I was having a hard time with when I was so I started out in traditional publishing where I published with a publisher and then went indie and now I'm hybrid. I do both, but I had I think when I was pitching the book, people were confused about whether it was historical or whether it was sci-fi. And so when I was writing the Immortal Vikings, and so I because I think the people that were writing Viking romance at the time were writing more historical, like Gina Konkel comes to mind. She was writing, still does, I think, writes amazing historicals. She knows so much about the Viking history that the show Vikings used to like tweet her questions about, like, is this, are we doing this right? Um, but so it's interesting because I think that people often think of Norse mythology as being the Norse history, but we don't necessarily think of, well, I don't necessarily think of Greek mythology as being the history of Greece. I mean, it's like it's mythology, so it's woven into the history. And so I didn't get a lot of pushback. Um, I think once I got better at pitching the book to so that people understood that this was more paranormal romance, then people were more into it. And around the same time, oh, I'm going to forget her other pen name. Caitlin Cruz also writes as Megan. It'll probably come to me after we hang up. But she had written sort of a futuristic, very sexy Viking series. And she never really said that they were Vikings, but it was kind of implied. And so I think maybe that helped me a little bit. And the first Thor movie had just come out, which actually didn't help me because people were saying, "Oh, this is just Chris Hemsworth fan fiction," which it would have been. But I actually wrote the book before the book came out, so maybe the books after that there was some Chris Hemsworth uh, influence. But so it was once it found its home, though, it found its home with somebody who really loved it. So um, so that worked out well. And then the first book ended up getting quite a bit of nominations in terms of Rita nominations um, and others. Yeah. Oh, Sarah just posted it's Megan Crane, Caitlin Cruz. Yeah, Megan Crane. She wrote as Megan Crane. She wrote I think 3 or 4 books. It's this dystopian environment where basically the entire world has all the waters have risen, and so there are these raiders in ships, which sounds very much like Vikings. Yeah. Sorry, did that answer your question? I feel like I rambled on
It
there at the
does, yes.
end.
Well, what is your process for world building? Because your books encompass so many different areas. Because you have the Vikings, you've got wolf shifters, you have berserkers, you have witches, soothsayers. I mean, there's a lot
Yeah.
of things that you're wrapping up in there.
Yeah, they all live in the same world, but they live in different geographical locations. And it's sort of like the Norse gods are meddling with them, but in different ways. And so the Vikings are directly targeted by Loki and his minions. And the wolf shifters are uh they are kind of Loki hasn't quite discovered them yet. And so they're a little bit quietly on the back end helping the Vikings in a way. And the only reason that why that has happened, they weren't really aware of each other for a long time, but then a Viking hooked up with a wolf, and so there you go. During a snowstorm in a cabin with only one bed, as they do. And
Yes, as one
so
does, right?
as one does, yeah. So so now they're aware of each other. Um, but the Norse mythology, it really comes from that I grew up in the south of Sweden, and there is so much uh, Viking history there, but it's a little bit strange because the Vikings built everything out of wood, like their long houses and their settlements. And it was such a long time ago that it's buried under like layers and layers and layers of sediments. But just outside of where I live, they have I was going to say recently, but in archaeological age, it's recently. But in the late 1990s, they discovered an well, actually, they knew that it was there since like the 1940s, but there was a World War II going on and other things, and nobody really had the funds to excavate it, and they didn't think that it was as big of a find as it turned out to be. So there is an archaeological dig about 20 minutes away from where I grew up, and it is changing the history of how we thought that the Vikings, where the Viking concentration was, because up until this point, the settlement outside of Stockholm, which is way further north, they thought that was the trading center, which those of us that are from the south of Sweden, that has really never made any sense because the south is closer to the continent, but also because we people from the north of Sweden that are from the capital make fun of us in the south because we have a weird accent. So so that's why it's part of it too. But so I was always really interested in Norse mythology, and part of it is because of my old social sciences history teacher noticed that I learned history really well if I read a fiction book about it. And so he happened to really like Norse mythology, and so he was feeding me books basically that were had Norse mythology in it. So it's always been in the back of my mind. And then I um I really like fairy tale retellings. I like fantasy, high fantasy books. And um, I was thinking at one point about like who are the famous Swedish literary characters that people know about. And at the time when I was writing this book, uh, it was Eric Northman from True Blood, the HBO series, and then the woman from A Girl with a Dragon Tattoo. And so I was like, oh, I wonder what it'd be like if the two of them met, because they're both contemporary since he's a vampire and left forever. And then, so that was like the kernel of the idea for the first Viking book. And then it just took off from there, and they ended up being completely different. But that's where it started with. And the Norse mythology is like there's a lot of pagan worshippers that worship the Norse gods on like on the internet and stuff. And if you talk to them, then my Norse mythology is not correct because I've switched things around. I haven't switched things around. I've just made it more female centric. So, and I think that there is a lot of feminism in Norse mythology. It's just hidden. You have to really dig for it because um, the 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 Norse sagas was written down by men, and so they were highlighting, all the great things that the male deities do. But I mean, come on, you can't have a mythology with things like Valkyries and shield maidens and tell me that like the women's weren't great warriors. So I've
Exactly.
put a
Mhm.
lot of that more on the forefront. Yeah.
So with that, is it the characters that come to you first, or is it the storyline?
That's an interesting question. Um, I think the characters and And often when I'm writing one book, a secondary character will like want to take over. So, so when I wrote the first Viking book, which when they were traditionally published, they were Viking Warrior Rising, Viking Warrior Rebel, and then Loki Ascending. And Viking Warrior Rising and um, Viking Warrior Rebel, when I got the rights back to those, I re-released them and edited them a little bit, very lightly, so that the wolves are more present in them. So they're now Berserker Obsession and Berserker Temptation. And the third book hasn't come out yet. It won't come out until later this year because the world is now, after a whole bunch of wolf books and some Viking novellas, that book needs to change a lot before I can release it. But when I wrote the first book, Naya and Leif are really strong characters. But uh, Astrid, who was like the shield maiden, the Valkyrie warrior that had a lot of page time in that book. I mean, she was like impossible to keep down. She was always stepping onto the page and doing stuff. So she ended up getting the second book, and this happens quite often. I think I made a TikTok about this. I didn't notice this, but the the wolf that ends up finding her fated mate with a Viking. The wolf's name is Nora, and she's in Wolfhunger. So spoiler alert that she ends up with a Viking. But she ends up with the Viking Ulf, and that couple apparently occurs in two other books and probably going to show up in another third one. And so somebody was asking if I was in love with this couple because they tend to pop up a lot. And this happens a lot where like the secondary characters take over. So I think that I am very attached to the characters. Um, and the and they will usually like step on and kind of talk to me, like almost like poke me, like, hey, you invented me, you put me on the page. I was like this side character over here in this book, but really I have my own story. Like I need to tell you my story. Like, come on, I need to tell you my story. So, so yeah, probably more character driven than, or I'll find a scene, but it's usually the characters that are in the scene. Um, and then I'll start thinking about, okay, what are these characters doing? Why are they on the page? And um, like what is their mission? Yeah.
Mhm.
And I talk about them
Well,
like
and I
they're real
have to admit,
people.
oh, but they are real people to us. I mean,
Yeah.
come on.
My
But
husband always like you often asks like, are we talking about friends that we actually know, or are these people that live in your head? And because he doesn't remember names very well, so he's like, do we know these people or do they just live in your head?
and when they're living in your head, is it like their story is just continuing, and this is stuff that will never make it on the page, but they are
Sometimes,
still kind of living their lives?
yeah, yeah, they still
Mhm.
kind of live in their lives. I don't always like, uh, I, I'm not always like aware of what they're doing, but it's almost like sometimes I'll write a bonus epilogue for a book, and then all of a sudden characters from a previous book will step on and like they have had like all this stuff happening and they've been on a trip and they've done all this stuff and like they're telling me or they're telling the people in the bonus epilogue about it. And I think that's why Ulf and Nora keeps on popping up often. Their book was a novella, and I think maybe that was a mistake. Maybe they needed a longer book because they won't leave me alone. So um but yeah, it's kind of like it's almost like catching up with friends that you haven't seen for a while. Like you kind of check in on them with Facebook every now and then. You're like, oh, they look like they're having a good, interesting life. And then you meet up and you catch up when they go back on the page in some other books. I realize that I sound insane talking about him like this, but this is what it's like. This is also what it's like when I read other people's characters. When I read books, I'm sort of like, oh, I feel like these are in a happy place right now. I'm going to leave them here, and then, I'll check in with them later.
Yeah. Well, and I think as readers, we have that too. I mean, being realistic, I mean, we do have to put books down sometimes because, I have to go to
Yeah,
the office and,
unfortunately.
real life does intrude. But sometimes you have to find that perfect spot of like, okay, it's okay to leave these characters right now. They're not in
Yeah.
danger. They're at a good point, and then I can come back and pick it up,
Yeah.
and everything's calm.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And if not, then you're just continuing to just read all night, and then it's a whole
Yeah.
other situation.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And then, but it's almost worth it the next day. You just have to drink more caffeine.
Yes, and caffeine definitely is our friend. Yes.
Yes.
Well, I want to switch over to what we call our fresh fiction facts. But before I do, I have to comment because when you were saying that, when you were thinking of like the famous Swedish authors and characters, and with Alexander Skarsgård, and then from the Girl with the Dragon, the one that immediately pops to my mind, which is not the right fit for your books, but it's Pippi Longstocking.
Oh,
I
yeah.
mean, that's what I grew up with.
She kind of does though. I mean, because she was like, her dad lived in the South Sea and she was like this little kid that lived on her own in a house with a horse and a monkey and she had a bag full of gold and went on adventures all the time. I mean, she definitely comes from Viking stock, I think.
Oh yeah, because mom had me. She had the Pippi Longstocking books for me, and then there was another one by the same author, Ronia the Robber's Daughter. And I'm
Yes, yes.
constantly on the lookout to find a hard copy of that because I
Yeah.
wore out the library. That one's hard, but I loved it.
Yeah, I have all of those in Swedish. Like my mom shipped them over for me because they were my favorites when I was younger. So they're in my bookcase in Swedish. It's Astrid Lindgren is one of my
Oh,
favorite authors. She's and also because she wrote that fantasy with a strong female character that I really always looked for as a when I was younger. I mean, she wrote with male characters as well, but they always got to go on these amazing adventures. And I loved her books.
I think that's the common theme. Again, I'm always looking for those strong female characters, and I never realize sometimes exactly when that started. But it does go back to the Pippi and Ronia
Yeah.
because I read those all the time.
You got indoctrinated early by the Swedes.
Definitely, yes. Well, jumping into the fresh fiction facts, though, these are questions kind of answer off the top of your head.
Okay.
Don't mean to stump you, but it does sometimes happen. Now, we were talking about caffeine earlier, but what is your favorite writing fuel? What is it that keeps you going?
Um, Diet Mountain Dew and Cheetos, but I have to
Oh
eat
my
the
God.
Cheetos. I have to eat the Cheetos with chopsticks so that my keyboard doesn't get all the orange stuff on it. Yeah.
Yeah, that could get definitely kind of messy. Yeah.
Very healthy diet.
Other than books, what is something that you own an insane amount of?
Shoes. I really like
Oh.
shoes, which is weird because I really kind of hang out in my day job is as a college instructor, and so I'm on my feet quite a bit. And so I wear like comfortable shoes most of the time at work, but I really love pretty shoes. So I have more shoes than I need, I think. That and uh gel pens in all kinds of different colors. Like I really like planners, and so I have a ton of like I'm looking over in the corner and there's like gel pens and colored pencils and colored markers and other colored markers. Like you can never get enough of different colored markers, basically.
Um, what is your favorite errand on your day off?
Favorite errand on my day off. Do naps count as errands? Or do I have to
They
actually leave
should,
the
right?
house? Yeah. Otherwise, probably going to get a massage, if that could be considered an errand, or going to Panera. I go to Panera to write a lot, so I really
Mm.
like their food. So yeah, probably having lunch with a friend at Panera. None of these are errands, I realize. Like I sounds like I don't really do errands. I guess I don't have a favorite errand.
Well, to get a massage, I mean, you have to make an appointment.
This is true, so that sounds like an errand. Yeah, we'll
Yeah,
go with that. Yeah,
yeah. I think that counts.
yeah.
Definitely. Yeah.
I'll throw pedicure in there then
Um,
too.
oh, okay.
Yeah.
No, that works. Yeah, both I see both of those as being errands.
Yeah.
You have to schedule the time.
You have to
Yes, that
put on
counts.
clothes and leave the house.
Therefore, it meets the definition. Yes.
Yes, exactly.
Okay, if you could see one and know that it's real, would you want to see a ghost or a shifter?
Oh, shifter. I think shifter.
Shifter.
Yeah. Yeah.
Would you rather go back in time to meet your ancestors or travel into the future to meet your descendants?
Hmm. I think back in time. Yeah.
And how
Because
far back would you want to go?
I don't know. I'd rather be the disappointment than be disappointed. So so I'm okay with disappointing my ancestors for my lame errands, but I don't want to go forward in time and find out that my bad habits has multiplied many times and now my offsprings it's like no good.
What is your oddly specific pet peeve that no one else seems bothered by?
Oh, um, I that's I have to pick just one. No. I don't like music. Well, I like music, but I don't like background music. Yeah, so I I have like a if I'm at a restaurant and there's background music, which there often is, or if I'm at work, we have one coworker who likes to sort of have I don't know, just like light music in the background when she works, when we're done with classes and we're kind of doing our stuff afterwards. And it just really annoys me that people just assume that everybody likes to have music on, even if it's not like headbanging music or whatever. But I think it's because I'm always listening for the story, because I love stories. And so even if it's instrumental, it kind of speaks to me and I hear a story somewhere. And so I need it to be quiet. And it's amuses me that people are like, oh no, like background music is just background. Nobody notices it. I'm like, it's there. How can it not bother you? But yeah, so that's the tick. Yeah.
I'm kind of scared to ask this next question I had queued up then. If you had to, what song would you pick for karaoke?
Oh, oh, I don't know. I have a horrible singing voice. So, how drunk am I? That's like one
Oh,
of the things. Yeah.
let's see. You're pleasantly tipsy, so
Oh,
you're
okay.
feeling
So I don't.
the buzz, but not
Yeah.
stupid drunk or anything.
So, so I think that's like I really like music, and maybe what bothers me is that it's not like the main event because I do really like music that much. Um, I would probably pick something by Alanis Morissette. I think that's what I sang last time we were at karaoke, because 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 I can kind of shout more than sing on some of her songs, and so I can mask that I have a horrible singing voice.
What is your most dog-eared book? The one that you keep going back to for rereads, either for pleasure or for research.
Oh, um, did we say like literally dog-eared, or can it be something that's like on my Kindle? Because I have both. Like
Something on your
there's
Kindle's fine. Either way.
okay. Um,
Oh, well,
I
okay. In that case, you got to give us both.
so my really dog-eared books in terms of that I reread a lot before I ever had a Kindle is the Valdemar series by Mercedes Lackey. I loved like that whole series, and it takes place in the same world but during different centuries. And so the characters that you read
Mhm.
in one set of books will be like the ancestors of the next favorite heroes and heroines, and those I have like read many times. Um, for things that I reread that are more contemporary, I reread. I really like Ilona Andrews, so I've probably read the
Um,
Kate Daniels series two or three times. And then I really like her Edge series also. That one I have reread more times than that. And then Janine Frost. I must have read her. Um, I've read the Night Huntress series more than once, but the one I keep on going back to is the Offspin, the three Vlad books, the Dracula books. Um,
Yeah.
I don't know how many times I've read those. Those are like my comfort reading, where it's like things are uncertain. I feel my anxiety like spiraling. I need to go and read my favorites. So those I reread a lot.
Okay, this might be a challenging question then. Whose world, yours or another author's, would you most want to step into?
Oh, maybe the Valdemar world, just to meet my like my teen heroes and heroines from that world. Because I mean, she had she had female warriors with talking swords, and uh other female warriors who had like companions that they could talk to, like they talked to animals like horses and other things. So all of that was like, I was a horse girl growing up, so I was just like,
Mhm.
oh, if I could just like have my own horse that I could mentally talk to, and then a sword that like trained me as a warrior, I would be in heaven. So maybe if I could step into that world and live my girlhood fantasy, that would be amazing.
Well, Wolf Duty just came out, but of course, we always want to know what are you working on next?
So right now I am working on the book that used to be Loki Ascending, but it's just now very different, but still the same two characters in it, the same couple. So it is Naya, who is the woman who ends up marrying the Leif, the king at the very beginning of the Berserker, the Norse Warrior Protectors Berserker series. um, Scott is her brother, and this is his story, and where he meets his fated mate, which happens to be Iria, who's the healer of the Vikings. And then I'm starting to set up the next Wolf book. I'm not quite sure what it's going to be called yet, or who's going to be the. I think I knew who's going to be like the main character of the wolves. Um, but there's two wolves that needs their own book that are sort of talking to me right now. So I'll be starting that probably later this year. Um, but before that, I've kind of soft launched a new series that's going to be more Norse folklore than the mythology, but almost all Scandinavian folklore comes from the mythology somehow. And so I am writing a romantasy series that is more romantasy than paranormal romance, and it's called the Water Guardian, and the main character is a descendant from the Norse um, ocean goddess, and so this will be one. She's kind of hiding out from the royal court of her fathers because she doesn't want to do what he thinks that she should do. So she's a shifter, but she's sort of like a mermaid, and she should be in the ocean, but she's hiding out in the Pacific Northwest lake area because she's trying to stay under the radar. So that will
Oh,
come out, I
wow.
think, late this year. So I'll be that,
So,
yeah. So
and
kind
do
of
you have a
working on a
title
lot
for
of
that yet?
projects. Sorry?
Do you have a title for that one yet?
Yeah, the first one is called Savage Waters, and it should be coming out. I have it slated for December. It will probably come out a little bit earlier than that. And I just got the cover for it, and so I should be doing a cover reveal soon. And it's up for pre-order if people are interested in it. But and there is a prequel to it that I wrote as a collaboration with a bunch of other authors. I did this really fun project where we were all writing kind of monster romance, and the prequel is Saved by the Great Grimm. And the character for the new series shows up in there a little bit, um, and so that was the
Okay.
prequel novella. Yeah.
Okay. And of course, then where is the best place for our readers and listeners to keep up with you and find out all these juicy details?
So the best way to keep up with me is my newsletter. I send out one at least once a month. Sometimes it becomes more current, but never more than once a week, depending on if there's a release month, then I might send out more often. And my paranormal and romantasy does so well in KU that it's hard to leave KU and go wide with those books. And so I am exclusive for Amazon for my ebooks, but my print books are everywhere. So you can also follow me on Amazon and or BookBub. They keep they are pretty good about sending out when a new book is coming out. But the newsletter is probably the best place. And also, if you sign up for the newsletter, I usually participate in a bunch of newsletter swaps, and so there's usually free books a couple of times a month.
And before we go, I also want to say the cover for your novella collection is absolutely gorgeous
Oh,
for
thank you.
the Viking or the Norse warrior protectors. Gorgeous. Love it. I mean,
That's
that's one of those book creepy type covers.
yeah, that's from a designer called Arts Candare. And yeah, they did a really good job. I'm really happy with
Mm-hmm.
it. I like the axe and the just the color scheme and everything else.
Mm-hmm. I mean, don't get me wrong. I like the guys for all the wolf books too,
Yeah.
but but the
Yeah, they
novella
have
one just blew me away. I thought the art was gorgeous.
yeah, it's I don't know if you guys can see behind me because it looks like I'm a little bit blurry, at least on my screen, but that cover right there, that's the novella collection the in print. And then Norse warrior protectors, the wolves and the berserkers, they have different covers in print than they have on the ebooks.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Well, Asa, thank you so much for joining us today. Now, don't go away because you're going to stick around and answer some other questions from our readers. And for those of you watching and listening, be sure go and get Asa's latest books. You will not be sorry. The Wolf, especially Wolf Duty, is fantastic and available now.